Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about solving inequalities. So, let's talk a little bit about which symbols we're going to be working with today. So, here we have our less than symbols. So, these two are whenever the value that we're talking about is less than a certain number. However, when it has this little line underneath, that means that that value is less than or equal to. On the other hand, we have our greater than symbols. And similar to the less thans, whenever we have a line underneath, that means that the value that we're working with is greater than or equal to that number. And whenever we're graphing, keep in mind that whenever it's also equal to, we're going to have a closed circle. And then when it doesn't have that line underneath, we're going to have an open circle. So let's work on some examples. Here we have x is greater than 1. So this symbol we know is our greater than. And since it doesn't have the line underneath, we're just going to simply have an open circle. And so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to place that open circle onto 1, and I'm going to face my arrow towards whatever numbers are greater than that 1, which is this way to the right. Because here we could see the numbers are increasing. 1, 2, 3, 4. The numbers are getting bigger. Those are all greater than 1. Here we have x is less than or equal to 4. And remember that whenever we have this line underneath, whenever it's also equal to, we have a closed circle. So let's graph it. We're first going to put that closed circle on 4. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to put the arrow facing towards whatever numbers are less than 4, which is this way. So now take a moment to pause the video and try this problem out. And when you're ready, unpause the video and we'll work on it together. Here we have x is greater than or equal to -3, which means we're going to use, again, that closed circle. So I'm going to put a closed circle at -3, and I'm going to put the arrows facing the numbers that are towards whatever is greater than -3. So I'm going to facing towards this way, and that's it. Here we have x is less than -2, which means we're only going to have an open circle because it doesn't have that line underneath. So I'm going to place that open circle at -2, and then I'm going to face it this way towards the numbers that are less than -2. And before we move on, let's recap what we've seen in previous videos about solving linear equations. So here we have this problem, and if we wanted to solve for x, we would use something called SAD MEP. So first, to solve for x, we're going to subtract or add, which in this case we're going to subtract because 8 is being added. So I'm going to simply subtract 8 on both sides. I get 2x is equal to 12. And then I'm going to divide both sides by 2 because that's what comes next. So I'm going to do x is equal to 6. And that's it. So we're going to use that same logic when it comes to solving linear inequalities. In order to graph, in order to know whatever x is less than or equal to or greater than or whatever it is, we need to be able to isolate it. We need to leave it alone. So we're going to use the same process. We're going to use SADMEP. So here, we're going to place our line over the inequality symbol, and I'm simply going to subtract 2 because 2 is being added. So I get x is less than or equal to 2. So since it's less than or equal to, I am going to place a closed circle. So I'm going to place a closed circle over 2. And I know that the numbers that are less than are this way, like that. So now take a moment to pause the video and try this one out. And when you're ready, unpause the video and let's work on it together. So I'm still going to divide my inequality. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by 3 because 3 is being multiplied with x. I'm going to divide both sides by 3 and I get x is greater than 2. So since x is only greater than, I'm going to have simply an open circle. So I'm going to place an open circle over 2 and then I'm going to put it facing this way because that the numbers are greater than 2. Now here, we're going to follow the same sad mep. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to subtract or add, which in this case I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides, and I get left with 2 over 3x is less than or equal to negative 4. So now the next thing that it's calling me to do is to divide or multiply. So what I'm going to do first to eliminate that fraction is that since 3 is being divided, I am going to multiply both sides by 3 in order to cancel it so that I could just get rid of the fraction. So I'm going to get 2x is less than negative 12. And that way, I'm not working with a fraction and I'm just simply going to have to divide 2. So here I'm going to divide 2 and I get x is less than negative 6. So negative 6 isn't on my number line. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new one right here with negative 6. And I'm going to place, since this is less than or equal to, I'm going to have my closed circle. So I'm going to place a closed circle over negative 6. And since it has to be less than, I'm going to face it to the left because that is where the numbers are less than negative 6. So now take a moment to pause the video and try this problem out. And when you're ready, unpause it and let's work on it together. So here, I'm still going to draw my line. Here I'm going to add 7 on both sides. And I get left with 4x is greater than 36. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide both sides by 4 and I get x is greater than 9. And again, 9 is not on my number line, so I'm going to create a new one. And then since this is simply a greater than symbol, so I'm going to put an open circle over 9, and I'm going to put it facing where all the numbers are greater than 9, like that. And now, in this example, we establish a new rule. So now for this one, what I have to do is that I have to divide by negative 3, right? And I will get x is less than or equal to negative 1. So now let's say x was equal to 1. And I had negative 3 times 1 is less than or equal to 3. So therefore negative 3 is less than 3. Is negative 3 less than positive 3? Well, yeah. But now what about for the second one? Is 1 less than negative 1? 1 is over here and negative 1 is over here. So clearly positive 1 is greater than negative 1 because it's farther to the right. And so this doesn't make sense. So that basically tells us that whenever we divide or multiply by a negative number, that we have to flip the sign. We have to flip the sign. So here, when I divide by negative 3, if we divide or multiply by negative, we have to flip the sign. So this will be x is greater than or equal to negative 1, which makes sense. So now we're going to have Now we're going to plot it like normal. This is saying greater than or equal to. So therefore we have a closed circle. So I'm going to have a closed circle over -1, and we're going to face it this way because this is where the numbers are greater than. So try this problem out, and when you're ready, unpause the video and let's work on it together. The first thing we're going to do is that we're going to add 7. And so we're left with -1 over 3x 36. And now here, I'm going to do the same thing as I did before, where I multiplied by my denominator. Here my denominator is 3, where I'm going to multiply by -3 because that negative sign is there. So I'm going to multiply both sides by -3. And let's remember that when we multiply or divide by negative, we are going to flip the sign. So we are left with 1x is less than -108. And then 1 times x is the same thing as just x, so we could write this as x is less than -108. And that's it. I obviously can't graph this on my number line, so let's create a new one. Here I have -108, -107, and I'm going to place an open circle over -108, and x has to be less than, so I'm going to face it towards all the numbers that are less than. And that's it.